I'm WG and let's talk about the most valuable item in the entire game. And that is this Omega code right here. So this Omega code as of this moment can be obtained at 1 per season confirmed. And here we have ours in the supply too. You can obtain it at 6,000 season currency. And what it does is it does not have an expiration date. You can hold on to this as long as you want while being able to use this to get a ego manifestation, a dupe for any 5-star of your desire, past, future, present. What that also means is, for those of you that have or haven't heard about it, we have it confirmed that at some point we will get a limited banner. These limited banners were mentioned as either collaboration characters, so if the CZN IP collaborates with, let's say, Freerin or ReZero or something else like that, these characters are going to be limited. And also there is a possibility for big celebration characters like, think Lunar New Year, half year anniversary, full year anniversary, maybe summertime celebration, stuff like that. Those characters can also be limited, which means that they will not go into the standard pool after their banner ends, but you can still use the Omega code on these characters. So if you want to know what is the smartest thing with your Omega code, if you have the will and the patience, then hold on to it. If not, or if you're interested in which characters' dupes are the strongest, even to see if maybe you need to dust off a character from your combatants because you pulled a couple but he's still level 1, this is what you're going to get. You're going to be getting a tier list all the way from E1 to E6, ranking every single character's epiphany. And let me make something clear on top of that as well. Do not use the Omega code on usually E1s, E3s or E5s. In general, E1s, E3s or E5s are breaking points that you shouldn't use a Omega code in. Rather, the way you would use an Omega code is to go into the E2, the E4 or the E6, because those are the biggest power spikes for a character across the board. So for example, if you can buy like a dupe from a shop and then also use the Omega code, you could technically use the Omega code for the E3 and the dupe from the shop for the E4, but just hold on to your Omega code until you get the most value. Now, enough yapping. I hope you understood the basics, so let's get into it. So the way we'll be doing this is at the top you see which dupe we're currently talking about, and then behind me you get the description at the top when we talk about it, and the order is going to be based on how they are in the agent collection, which means the order would go Luke, Caleb, Magna, Rin, Olea, Maylin, Veronica, Renoa, Hugo, Yuki, Shizuru, Haru, Keiron. That is the order in which we're going to go through these through these egos and explaining to you why they are ranked the way they are. Furthermore, this whole ranking is based on 3 factors. Factor number 1, how important is this dupe for the character themselves? How much do they change the character? Number 2, a bit more of a how important is the character themselves in the current state of the game? And number 3, the comparison of how does this E1 compare to the rest of the available E1s in between all the 5 stars we have as of this moment. So let's get into Luke's E1. What it does is it increases the damage of a finisher round from 250 to 300% while reducing the amount of handgun bullets needed to be used to unseal the card, make it usable in the first place, from 5 down to 4. So the most important factor here is that this bullet usage isn't per time you draw it, but throughout the whole duration of the fight. Meaning that if you play 4 bullets for the whole duration of the fight at any point in time, then the card becomes unsealed and you can play it at 0 cost. The reason why he's down in B tier is because the finisher round itself is nowhere near defining enough for Luke for this to be truly valuable. The plus 50% damage increase itself also isn't that great unless you find a big amount of multiplicative damage bonus, because indeed it goes onto the base damage, meaning for example a 100% damage increase to this multiplicatively would take it from 300 to 600%. The another issue you could say is that the card itself, at least in terms of E1, is a unique card, meaning even if you wanted to, it would be unable for you to copy that card. And overall, there isn't really a noticeable difference between a E0 or a E1 Luke, giving him this B tier rating in terms of the E1. Now on to Caleb. Caleb herself has made her way into A tier, and the reason for that is because all of a sudden the shield goes from a 100% base to 120% base, and then gives you a shield equal to the number of X AP you've used to play this card. It's one of the very few X cards in the X cost cards in the game, but that's besides the point. What it allows you to do is for one turn retain all your cards in hand, meaning this allows you to carry over your hand from the last turn into the next turn, which can really set up some pretty damn strong turns. Is effective in chaos, and the whole point of this here is that now this card itself also has retain, which allows you two things. Number one, more planning in which cards you carry over into the next turn, while number two, the ability to keep this card in hand until you want to use it to block an enemy's hit. And then I guess number three, a retain card cannot be drawn again, meaning you also thin your deck, allowing you to be unable to pull into absolute protection again, because it is in your hand and it stays in your hand until you play it. So that is Caleb. So then we have ourselves Magna. Now Magna adds initiation to the Storm of the Bitter Cold card, which means that this card right here, which is one of the more integral cards to Magna as a whole, always starts in your hand. So what this means is that whenever you gain a shield by an ability, you gain one counterattack. One counterattack meaning the counterattack gain. Counterattacks as a whole are very integral to Magna herself. And especially with the changes to counterattacks can now hit harder than ever, though they still can't crit. So this is just a very simple, okay, you have a key card that is very important to the unit, you can play it at the beginning of every single fight, and then you can start profiting from gaining ability, shields by abilities to then gain more counterattacks. So this one is overall just a straight up win. A win also comes from Rin. So Rin, our first S tier class, and that is due to it adding plus 20% damage to the Darkness Secret Art Black Dance. The reason why this is so important is because this Darkness Secret Art Black Dance can turn into up to a 6 hitter, meaning that instead of it just being a 20% bonus, it can go all the way up to a 120% bonus, and more importantly, it also goes to the base value, meaning that it makes multiplicative damage boni more effective. And that is then the way you read it. Another important part, and why I have valued this so highly, is because one of the main ways to play your Rin is the ability to move the Darkness Secret Art Annihilation and Darkness Secret Art Black Dance playing them in your turn, and then after playing them, get them back into your hand, meaning you will be able to use this card multiple times per turn, benefiting from the E1 multiple times per turn. Overall, just being a pretty solid card. It is pretty much key to the damage output of your Rin, and here E1 is actually pretty darn good. Now Orlea's E1 right here adds the retainability to Will of Light. It's kind of the same way how we explained Caleb, and that is you can now keep this Will of Light for the turn that you need it. Nothing is more annoying than having your perfect Swifty, or let's say in a damage increase scenario, having your perfect softy lined up that increases the damage amount of the next attack card used by 20%, and then building up to it, and then potentially like losing that all because you like play an attack card and not being able to go into your burst turn, or activating the healing on a sturdy while you're full HP. So, or even if you wanted to play this Will of Light card to trigger, let's say, barrel retain effects, you really want more control. The more control you have about your Will of Light application, the better value you can get out of it, making it easier to get bang for your buck for a 2-cost card, which is darn expensive. So it's just overall a nice win, allowing you to use it whenever you need. Same is true for also that clutch 200% healing. So that's the reason why it's up there in S tier. Mei Lin, on the other hand, gains the ability to guaranteed crit on her guaranteed weakness attack, Flame Dragon Sovereignty, at 300% damage. So yeah, number one though, the problem is it's conditional, meaning the target needs to be broken for this to crit. If your target isn't broken, you don't get the additional chance. And number 2, Mei Lin, at the end of the day, she really isn't all about this Flame Dragon sovereignty. The show stealers are definitely her basic attacks right here with the Unity attack and defense, and then obviously the Rising Dragon Spire with the multi-hitters. So it truly doesn't add anything too important to your Mei Lin. It's just I mean, okay, it's nice to have, but you wouldn't really go out of your way to attain it. Then we have ourselves Veronica. The same is a bit more true with Veronica as well, and the reason why it's ranked lower is because it's an upgrade to an upgrade card, and that means you can play this card exactly once per fight, can be more successful during a chaos run, can potentially help you out with those turn 1 clears, but if a fight becomes longer than 1 turn, you do not gain an ability or a effect from this anymore. Though at the end of the day, getting 2 extra reload stacks is still a big damage bonus, and can allow you to get out some really strong ballistas for the 1 turn where you do actually play out that reload card. Though with it being an upgrade card and with her not really needing the reload from this because she has other ways to gain reload, that is kind of the reason why she's that much lower in ranking. So for the Sleeping Memory, the damage increase effect increases by 20% based on each discarded bullet. What this simply means is right here, you now get plus 70% for each discarded dirge bullet instead of plus 50%, meaning that let's say you have a hand of 5, all of a sudden instead of 250%, you get yourself 350%. So it's just a straight up damage increase. It gets more valuable the more dirge bullets you have in hand, and with the card itself already possessing Retain, it allows you to wait for that one moment where you get the most value out of it, allowing you to pretty much, yeah, quite reliably do a big amount of burst damage by playing the last ditch assault, but also then again, it's not in that like, ooh, super integral part to her, and also it does require a bit more setup to have the right amount of dirge bullets to then discard all of them to deal the extra damage through that usage. So Hugo. Why the hell is Hugo all the way up in Triple S? The reason for that is what happens to his card is it goes from increases extra damage amount of Commence the Hunt, his main damage gimmick, his main idea, his whole follow-up shenanigan, from a 40% multiplicative to a 50% multiplicative, meaning that, yeah, you boost what Hugo is all about. Hugo is all about follow-up attacks. The more follow-up attacks you do, the more follow-up damage Hugo deals. By increasing the damage of the follow-ups, you increase the damage of Hugo. It is just the perfect way to boost Hugo's damage quite easily, going onto the card as well as also going onto the upgrade card, meaning you play it out once. It also, yeah, thins out your deck, which it obviously does without it. But yeah, no, it's just straight up boosting what Hugo is good at and making it even better. So if you're a big Hugo fan, you could, in potentiality, use the Omega code to get yourself Hugo's E1 if you really wanted to. I don't recommend it though. So then we have ourselves right here the Yuki. So why is Yuki up that far? That is because the debuff on Iceberg Cleave is that debilitating. Iceberg Cleave as a whole is an incredibly strong card. It is a 1-cost card that so long as you just draw it or activate the inspiration effect through other means, you get a 2-hitter at an incredible base amount for AoE damage. The card is incredibly strong, but it is also, to a degree, you could say incredibly weak, or not incredibly weak, but incredibly impacted by the debuff of not having the E1, and that is that you just decrease the damage amount of Iceberg Cleave by a multiplicative 20%. So instead of, the way you can simply think of this is, instead of us going, oh, we lose from 221 down to 200%, I mean, that's not bad. Instead of losing just 20%, you actually lose 44%, and due to it being a 2-hitter, you actually lose 88% damage on this AoE attack, and it's also base damage, or I guess you could say final multiplier, making it even worse, making the E1 even better because it makes the debuff less as worse because it makes it disappear. It's like, obviously it would be better if this E1 didn't exist in the first place, but you can't use the E1 to get rid of that effect, and Iceberg Cleave is definitely up there when it comes to Yuki's most important cards. Our newest unit, Shizuru. Now, why is Shizuru up there as well? Let's just speedrun it. You get a plus 20% damage amount to the Shadow of the Moon. So now all of a sudden your Shadow of the Moon just deals more damage and you also heal for more. 8% health per Shadow of the Moon, especially during a Chaos run, is more reliable than 5% health per Shadow of the Moon during a Chaos run. And also the plus 20% here gets multiplied the more hits you deal. In a more normal build on a Shizuru, you can get a Shadow of the Moon at like 3 hits. If you, for example, have the inhibit buff active, then potentially maybe like a 1 or 2 extra hits from other interactions in her kit, giving you a 20, 40, 80% on 4 hits respective damage bonus. But then also in conjunction with her most, you could say most used build as of this moment, that is just the concept of stacking as many Secure Me extra hits as possible, while also obviously stacking then as many damage boni for the next bind card used with Oni Hunt. So just as an example, if all of a sudden your Shadow of the Moon hits for 20 times, then this plus 20% bonus is actually plus 400% because it's for 20 different hits. So now for Haru, we increase the damage amount increase of Lift Anchor from a multiplicative 70 to a multiplicative 100. Simple example here would be this anchor shot just as its base value has 240%, and then with the 70% multiplier you get yourself around 170% damage bonus, but with the 100% multiplier you get yourself the full 240% added onto your anchor shot. It's just a simple way to increase Haru's main damage gimmick, the anchor shot itself. You do also increase the cost by 1, so you have to do a bit more AP managing and the like, but overall it's Haru's main damage gimmick. It makes it stronger, it makes the anchor shot better, and that is just the way it goes. It is a pretty decent upgrade to what Haru can do. And then lastly we have ourselves Keiron. So Keiron, what he now gains is the ability to create 5 futilities instead of 3. And the interesting part here is this E1 itself with Keiron at E1 is less valuable than it will be, especially if you go into those later, these later epiphanies or later egos, E2, E3, E4. So this one becomes more valuable over time, while also becoming incredibly more valuable should you have yourself the exclusive partner Briar. So if you just play Keiron and if you just go from E0 to E1, you're not going to notice as much of a difference. But if you actually then further upgrade your Keiron with multiple copies later down the line, and then also with a partner, this becomes more valuable. But overall, it's just a pretty solid way to get yourself more futilities, which is Keiron's main shenanigan, his main mechanic. So Luke E2, what it does is if you use 3 bullet cards, you get 2 more handgun bullets. The only limitation is that the bullet damage itself gets reduced by 50%, which gets put off if you, for example, get the Mark bullet, because the Mark bullet does most of its damage with Mark, and then also the fact that it's limited to once per turn. If this wasn't limited to once per turn, it would be the strongest dupe in the entire game by a large margin. But overall, what you get out of this is the ability, you use 3 bullets, you get 2 more, meaning you get 5. The most obvious synergy here is the ability to trigger the condition of Janet, where Janet wants you to use 5 bullets so that you get a 6th, and that 6th bullet then deals more damage. And the reason why this one is just good is because these 2 bullets are not only 0 cost cards, so you can, for example, play Cassie's Quest synergy, but also it's just 2 extra hits to the Dance of the Demon that you don't have to pay any AP or extra resources for, which can also get incredibly scary depending on how high the base multiplier of your Dance of the Demon is. Same is true still for the attack card variant. The only thing I guess you could say a little bit holding this back is once again this once per turn thing. So if you, for example, play turn 1 or 1 turn burst Luke, you're not really going to get a lot of value out of this awakening memory outside of 2 additional hits. But especially if you play Luke for 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns, 5 turns, the more turns you play, the more handgun bullets this gives you, the more valuable it becomes. So that is our E2 Luke. Now on to Rin. So for our next example we have Khalib. What this says is that at the start of the battle, so whenever you go into a fight, and on shuffling your deck, meaning you go through your whole deck once, you've played every card in your deck and the discard pile goes back into your draw pile, you put a vulture ejection from anywhere in your draw pile to the top of the draw pile, meaning that either on turn 2 you are guaranteed to get yourself a vulture ejection, or just by drawing 1 card from any source you're guaranteed to draw into a vulture ejection, with vulture ejection obviously being Khalib's main damage gimmick, Khalib's main damage way, and also Khalib's best way to get into her big damage hitter, which is the 400% defense based damage coming from the Silver Whale at 3 stacks attack, where you can use the vulture ejection to stack up those Silver Whale stacks. So overall it just makes Khalib's gameplay loop smoother. Is it truly necessary on a Khalib? Honestly, not really. Does it make an already really good unit even better? Absolutely. And it just puts even more consistency into this. And also, if you have vulture ejection multiple times in your deck, which most Khalib players will have, even if you draw a vulture ejection with your turn 1 draw, it is still going to put a second one onto the top of the draw pile, meaning with just 1 draw card, now you have 2 in the hand, and now you can trigger both with the Celestial keyword. I hope it's still Celestial, right? They went back from heaven? Yes, it's still Celestial. Let's go. So yeah, we have ourselves a Magnus. So Magnus counters now inflict 1 freeze on the target. Freeze is just a stacking debuff that whenever you take damage from Magnus attack cards, adjacent monsters take 50% defense based damage, and the freeze is removed upon the activation of said effect. Overall, it's just more damage for your counters, it's just more value for your counters, and you could probably, I mean, depending on how counter heavy and how well built out your Magna is, you might even be able to, now with the counter changes, justify this being kind of like an S-tier awakening, though at least it's nothing that a Magna needs to shine at what she already shines at. Now, why is Rin in B? The reason why Rin is in B is that this is, yeah, at least they fixed the wording, right? Before this, that said whenever you gain Dark Mist Stance, you gain the card. Now it says the proper way, and that is at the start of the turn, so long as you start your turn with Dark Mist Stance, you create an additional card. This additional card itself has a 70% damage bonus and gets plus 20% damage for each attack card of this unit used this turn, which usually turns out to be anywhere from like 2 to like maybe 5. The big problem here is that it's attack cards, so for example the draw cards, they don't count into this, so you get around a, yeah, most of the time 170% damage, and if there are no attack cards of this unit in hand, you can play this card for free. Only 2 problems is either A, you have this card in hand and you don't have enough AP to play all your Rin cards, leading to this card costing 1 and you being unable to use it, and B, this card itself being generated at the start of your turn, potentially pushing you over the hand size limit and allowing you to not draw into something, and then C, at the end of the day, it's anywhere from 100 to like 200, maybe maximum 400, 500 extra damage in a turn. It really isn't the biggest revelation ever, and the concept of it sounds greater than the effect of it truly turns out to be in the end. Like a Rin can very well live with E1 rather than having to need to get that E2. So Orlea right here, whenever a creation goes from a 2-star into a 3-star, you trigger the retain 1 time, meaning a Swifty starts with 150% extra damage, a Sturdy heals you a bit, and a Softy gives you a damage bonus to the next attack card played. It's okay, it's kinda sweet, it can help you with stacking, but most of the time when you obviously go into that 3-star, you're not going to evolve that 3-star any further, and there's a limit to how many slimes you truly keep in your hand. So while it is a great ability, it is nothing that should be chased, nothing that is truly game changing for Orlea. we also then have ourselves your Mei Lin. So now Mei Lin's cards, any of her cards, so long as they deal damage, they put 1 Ember onto the target. Let's just quickly revisit what Ember actually does. So right here, Ember is when hitting or putting a target in a Ravage state, deal damage for each stack of Ember the target has, up to 5 stacks. Upon activation, Ember is removed. So what that means is that your Mei Lin now all of a sudden gets a extra damage bonus to targets that are in the Ravage state, while also having the ability to build up more Ravages to deal more damage to targets that are broken. But this again all relies on the fact that you do actually break the target, and then these embers themselves disappearing every time you hit them. It's just, Mei Lin is so good that you do not need more Mei Lin epiphanies to make her greater, and most of her epiphanies don't have the biggest of impacts. Yeah, you could say. So that's kind of like that justification for having her that lower. Though honestly, on second thought, it is still a damage bonus to Mei Lin, and even though Mei Lin doesn't need it, you could probably move her up to a potentially even higher. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just Mei Lin really does not need awakenings or dupes, I guess. So, why is Veronica that high then? So Veronica's E2 applies a new debuff, and this debuff, at least according to what people have tested, gives you a multiplicative 20% increase, similar to how vulnerability works at 50% to the final damage the target takes from a ballista, right? So whatever ballista, however many ballistas, they all get a 20% further almost final multiplicative damage bonus. And it also allows you to target which target you want to target, which can be quite nice, and Chaos can help you in the hyperspace basin. Though, for example, if you have an AoE ballista, it doesn't really do anything with the target change. Though it is a big increase to Veronica's overall damage output and can help her deal more damage with her main gimmick, which should at least justify her S rank position. Now we have another bullet character, another character with their E2, another character that creates a bullet, but Veronica is a little different, and that is, there is no turn limit here. There is no turn limit to this, meaning that so long as you always create 4 Dirge bullets, you'll then get an additional Dirge bullet called the Dirge Bullet Finale, and the Dirge Bullet Finale, simply speaking, is just like a normal Dirge bullet, but twice as good upon discard. A little better on top of that as well, with like plus 20% on the discard, but it's just, this Dirge bullet is just as if you were to generate 2 more Dirge bullets if you play with discard shenanigans. So that means every 4 Dirge bullets, you technically get 2 more, meaning that, yeah, you get 6 Dirge bullets. It is a big damage increase. It adds a lot of damage to what she can do. And it is definitely something that if you are a Renoa main, you will be very, very happy about getting your hands on. Now, so Hugo's E2. For every 2 follow-ups you do, Hugo himself does another follow-up, dealing 40% times 2 damage to random enemies. If it's only 1 target, he's going to attack the same target twice. If it's multiple, it's random. And if the same target is attacked, you gain 1 Hunt Commence, but this Hunt Commence additional part, meaning 1 extra follow-up back for spending 2, has a condition of once per turn, whereas this one is for every 2 times you trigger it, meaning if, for example, you do, let's say, 10 Hugo follow-ups, you're going to trigger this 40% times 2 effect 5 times. So that is Hugo's E2. It is another damage increase. It synergizes again well with Hugo's main kit, and that is follow-up attacks. And that is what you're going to get yourself out of this Hugo E2. Now, why do I have Yuki's E2 ranked so low? The whole reason for that is because where other characters get extra damage, extra bullets, extra shenanigans, this is quality of life. Like, at its core, this is Yuki quality of life, meaning that for the first 2 turns, you do not have to worry about drawing inspiration at the beginning of your turn or activating inspiration effects. The cards are going to come pre-awakened, pre-inspired, and it can be helpful if you want to do like a low turn clear for the hyperspace basin, but if you play a good Yuki, if you know how to play Yuki, then you can get your inspiration regardless of if you do or don't have this. This is not a damage increase. This is, at the end of the day, as I just said, just quality of life, making it not really worth it, especially not in comparison to what you've kind of seen from other E2s already. Same is true with Shizuru here, where Yuki only gets quality of life. Shizuru actually gets the ability to, when using a Shadow of the Moon, again without a turn cap, create one Shadow of the Moon card. The simplified version of this is, if you stack to 3 binds and then use the card, you already get one card that has bind 1 already back, meaning you only need to get a further 2 bind stacks to again get a Shadow of the Moon, to then use it, to again only need to get 2 bind stacks or 10 Will-O-Wisps to again use it. And then, so that way you can, for example, get yourself a bit of like a Shadow of the Moon spam build going, which is something I'll be chasing later down the line, because I have the dupes lying around, but for now I still play E0 Shizuru. And depending on how valuable or how viable this E2 build actually can become, she might go up, she might go down, but it is a pretty damn solid ability. And it also means just by needing less cards to go into it, you also get more healing out of it. And if you combine it with the E1, that means that, for example, if you use 3 Shadow of the Moons in one turn, you heal yourself by a fantastic 24% max health. That is pretty darn good. Maybe Shizuru healer is on the way. But then we have ourselves Haru. So Haru's E2 is triple S. The reason why it's triple S is all of a sudden you can use Anchor Shot even if you don't have the AP to play it. So the way this works is very simple. Anchor Shot, it is all multiplicative numbers, right? So an Anchor Shot, if you play it at 2, does 100% of its damage. If you play an Anchor Shot at 1 cost, so for just 1 AP, it still does 60% of what it would usually do. And if you play an Anchor Shot for free, so at 0 AP, it is going to be dealing 20% of what it would usually do. But if you, for example, play 5 Anchor Shots, all of a sudden you still have gained the value of what an Anchor Shot would have done in the first place. So it just allows you to mega spam Anchor Shots, especially with the Anchor Shot, with the Anchor Pointer to Anchor Retrieve to go again. The only issue here is, do not make a Anchor Shot 3 cost and then play it, because that's going to reduce the damage to to 0, right? If you increase the cost of Anchor Shot by 1 and then you play it at 0, you don't get any damage. But it is still a very absolute transformative upgrade to Haru and can open up some very, very fancy, abilities. Now here we have another Charon, another Charon dupe that becomes more valuable the better invested your Charon is. So where you just gain the E2, you don't really notice it too much, because what it says is, if you play out or if you exhaust 2 futilities, you just gain yourself plus 100% damage to all enemies. So now you lean a bit more into that AoE damage side of Charon. But then all of a sudden, if you use, for example, Briar and you exhaust, let's say, 10 futilities, that is still 500% AoE damage. This damage can also increase based on multiplicative damage bonus, yada yada. And the true key will become clear once we go to the E3s. So these were all the E2s. Welcome to the E3 speedrun. So Luke's E3 overall, it doesn't really do too much. It's just extra damage, and it's also only by plus 100%. Extra damage per card with the hand size kept at 10. Then we have ourselves Kalib. The reason why Kalib is up here is because you gain 1 Silver Veil on use, which can help you cycle into more Silver Veil to deal more damage. That's the only reason why that one is up that high. Magna, also again, just more damage, which is the reason why, like, just more damage from the ult, it truly isn't that important. Just more damage, but at least also 1 vulnerable, which can help you deal more damage with the next hit you deal. Then Orlea. Orlea, at least, instead of, so the way you read this is, you get 1 of each 2-star that then instantly becomes a 3-star, which then also instantly triggers its retain effect from the E2, meaning that you are starting off with a full hand of all three 3-star slimes, all of them also being retained already once. Then Mei Lin, I guess at the end of the day, it's also just raw damage, but at least for her basic attack kit, the next 6 basic attacks used rather than just the next 4 basic attacks used gain an additional hit, but it is still just raw damage. Veronica as well, also just raw damage, but hey, at least she gets an additional ballista, which is more damage, depending on what kind of ballista you get, which might or might not fit the situation. Renoa, you get it, it's just more damage. And then we have ourselves Hugo right here, and that is when using the last resort card, the max stacks of commence the hunt increase by 1. Honestly, I'm not super sure how important this one can be going up by 1 cap, but if for some reason you find yourself in a situation where using 1 card actually puts you over the commence of the hunt cap before you can use it, having a higher cap can be better, but it's more about generating them rather than having a higher cap. Yuki also, it's just more damage. Shizuru, it is just more damage. And Haru, it is just more damage. Now, why is Charon up so high? And that is because all of a sudden, his ultimate doesn't just exhaust all futilities in your hand. No, now it also just exhausts all futilities in your graveyard as well. Meaning you can use this one Charon ult to exhaust every single futility, and also the damage increase stays at plus 80, but the more futilities you have, the bigger the increase. There is no cap to this, so it is a massive damage increase to the ult, but also a massive increase to Charon synergies due to you getting the extra damage for exhausted futilities that you can exhaust with the ultimate. The ability to gain more futilities, so you can then keep them in your hand, let them go into your graveyard to exhaust them with the ultimate. And then also right here, for example, the black hole overall just scaling with the amount of futilities exhausted, like this one, which just goes to incredibly ridiculous numbers. So that is why Charon's E3 is up there. It's by far the best E3 out there, and it's only the only one I would really consider going for. With, like, for example, even an Omega code, it can absolutely become worth it. So, E4 time in general, you can never go wrong with going with the E4 for a character. It, in most cases, depending on how you look at it, could be even more impactful than the E2 for the character, and that is because for almost all characters, it's just a straight up damage buff. Starting with Luke, whenever Luke uses a bullet card, you gain target analysis, meaning that after the first bullet, your next bullet deals 10%, after the second bullet, your next bullet deals 20%, and then 30%, and then 40%. So you use 4 bullets, and all of a sudden you deal 40% more damage with every single bullet, which becomes incredibly impactful if you think about the fact that bullet multipliers are that small anyway. And then if you say, for example, then use let's take a random example. You use 12 bullets for your turn, then for the last 8 you still add 40% on top of every single one of these bullets. And the important part here also, this works fantastically even with like a turn 1 Luke, because you can use this hole for 1 turn stacking damage bonus throughout the whole duration of the fight. The only thing that you could criticize about this one is that it doesn't increase the damage of non-bullet cards, so more specifically the Dance of the Demon not counting as a bullet card, but honestly at the end of the day it's still a big damage increase that you'll notice when playing with Luke and somehow getting your hands on the E4. Now for Khalib, the E4 is just a straight up, you get up to plus 20% damage and up to plus 20% shield throughout the whole duration of the fight every time. And the way you stack it is by triggering the Silver Veil effect upon gaining 3 Silver Veil stacks. And the important part here is that it is a smaller boost, 1 to damage, 1 to shield, but it lasts, there is no turn duration assigned to that boost. So honestly, just overall pretty solid. Now for Magna, Magnus is a bit weirder, and that is counterattacks have been now changed to also interact with vulnerability, with Magna applying vulnerability herself. And depending on how many counterattacks you apply, she might actually eat through all your vulnerability stacks, but the moment you get to the E4, that is no longer the case, allowing your Magna to fully benefit from the 50% damage, multiplicative damage increase from a vulnerable without getting rid of the vulnerable stacks that you've worked so hard to build with your with your Magna in the first place. So overall, it's just a damage increase that can also increase the damage of your team, because if you run somebody else with Magna and Magna eats up all the vulnerability stacks, that other unit does less damage as well. Same is also true for her cards as a whole. Then we have ourselves E4-In. E4-In is big quality of life. Huge quality of life. What this means is no matter which card you play, you always enter the stands. So for example, even if you don't have any like of your stands entering cards in your hand, you can play the attack cards of somebody else, whatever you want, and then you just play a Rin card and all of a sudden boom, you're in stands no matter what. Works with neutral cards, works with monster cards, works with forbidden cards, works with anything you add in from the outside. So all of a sudden your Rin can just always be in stands, and thinking about the stands becomes a non-issue, because you basically always be in stands. There is some fancy stuff you can do with it, like for example cutting all basics that give you stands, changing the Dark Mist Slash away from giving you stands, or potentially even cutting it in the first place, and then also not needing to gain Dark Mist stands from this card any longer. So yeah, it is massive quality of life. Sadly, in my opinion at least, not a damage increase, which is what you're kind of getting used to, and you will be used to once we see these others E4s as a whole. So here we have ourselves Orlea. Orlea, just whenever you have a creation card in hand, increases the damage of all allies by 20%. So just a straight up damage increase. It makes your hyper carry deal more damage, but also it isn't the most significant of boosts. Then we have ourselves Mei Lin. The reason why Mei Lin, you know, we could technically actually put into S tier, at least when it comes to Mei Lin Awakenings as a whole. This one would at least provide the biggest damage boost to a Mei Lin out of all the prior, egos we had a look at, and that is because whenever you ravage a target, meaning you break a target with a Mei Lin card, you gain yourself 1 Flame Dragon Awakening. Flame Dragon Awakening for 1 turn makes all her cards deal 20% more damage and an extra damage against ravaged targets, so you basically get a plus 40% damage bonus for the target that you just ravaged with every single one of her cards, which at the end of the day just ends up adding up, as well as also boosting her final hit from the multi-hits. But again, what holds Mei Lin back is that she's so good that investing into her E4 is kind of a waste, because she already kills everything without needing any of those dupes. Veronica is just pretty straight up. You just increase the stacks of your reload, meaning that you'll be able to generate more reloads until you cap out, so you have a higher ceiling, and it also increases the main damage source of Veronica, which is her ballistas. So her ballistas can now gain an additional 50% damage bonus because you have a higher cap of reload. Then we have ourselves Renoa. So Renoa is whenever you discard a Dirge Bullet, which you do really often with her, you gain 1 Rose's Resolve. Rose's Resolve increases her damage by 40%, and then it only gets removed upon shuffling the deck, meaning that not only is it super easy to get within just 1 turn, it also stays until you deck shuffle, and then it's again super easy to get, stays until you deck shuffle. It's just a big damage bonus, and it's also going to work with, for example, the extra damage that a discarded Dirge Bullet does. Then for Hugo, whenever the commands of the hunt is triggered, you gain 1 Arbiter's Wrath. For 1 turn, increases Hugo's damage by 10%. Hugo is all about triggering multiple of these commands of the hunts, even on top of the cap that he stacks to, by just reducing it and then generating them again and then reducing and generating. So this is just straight up more damage for Hugo, up to 40%, and because it says Hugo's damage, you can also have this work on his hunt commences, so you stack hunt commences to do more damage with hunt commands to do more hunt commences to do more damage with hunt commands, if that makes sense. Then we have ourselves our Yuki right here. Gain 1 Sword Dance each time this unit's card is drawn through an ability, meaning that if you draw 2 of her cards through an ability, doesn't have to be her ability, could be a teammate's ability as well, you get a 20% damage bonus to her cards for that turn. So overall, just taking her already high multipliers like the 221% by 20%, meaning even more AoE damage, turning her into even better of a AoE cleave machine. Then we have ourselves our Chizuru right here, and that is when you gain a Shadow of the Moon, you gain 1 Lunar Shard, and then the moment you've created 3 Shadow of the Moons for the whole duration of the fight, you add an additional 30% to Chizuru's attack cards, which also interacts with the Shadow of the Moon plus multi-hit stacking, because then you take the 30% times the amount you multi-hit with that card to increase the damage, but also increasing the damage of other cards, like for example the Ecstasy of Violence, the 9-cost 4-hitter, then also just does more damage and you can send it. It's just a pretty straightforward damage increase. Then we have ourselves Haru right here. You might have guessed it already, every time Haru uses an anchor shot you gain 1 power supply, which increases the damage of Haru's attack cards by 20%. This can stack up to 3 times. At the point of the E4 you'll also have the E2, meaning that mostly you'll get this turn 1 at Wave throughout the whole duration of the fight, and all your attack cards just deal more damage. It just adds up. Charon, whenever you use a futility you gain 1 Paradox of Nothingness, which for 1 turn increases Charon's attack card damage by up to 30% at full stacks. Important is you also again have access to the E3. By the point you have E3 Charon you'll probably get his partner as well, meaning you're getting very good at just triggering these futilities, which can then also help you to get the damage bonus for your big boost. And then to top it all off, you'll also be able to just play a futility normally to increase the damage of the next futility you play. So even just normal behaviors, non-super exhaust shenanigans on Charon just becomes strong. So, E5 time. The way you translate this simply is every single action the character takes increases by 6%. Character plays a unique card, plus 6%. Character plays a basic card, plus 6%. Character plays a common card, plus 6%. The only exception to this is forbidden cards, as forbidden cards don't get any stats from potential. So that is that, and then let's have a look at the tier list in a little bit of a different way, because there's so many people in the same tier. So overall, the E5, it's kind of just like this stalling, this wasted ego in you going into the E6, and the main benefit you get from this is just slightly more damage across the board on the character, but have it or not have it, it really doesn't make too much of a difference, which is why they're all in B. And the reason why Hugo is in C is because Hugo does his damage through the Hunt Commence, and the basic potential, or none of his potentials actually affect Hugo's follow-up attack, so meh, he ain't really doing anything with it. So E6 time, the most unattainable egos in the entire game. You either dedicate your whole account to getting there ever so slowly, or you have the Kiching-Ching, or a mix of both. And yeah, the final egos for a character. So let's see what they're all about and whom profits the most. So first off, Luke. So what Luke does is he increases the E4 from a 10% to a 15% bonus, meaning it stacks 15, 30, 45, 60% bullet damage after 4 bullets used, and then also adds an effect that each time 12 bullet cards are used to create a HVAP. There is no limit to the amount of these you can create, and also going from the first HVAP to the next HVAP only takes 11, because the HVAP itself is a bullet. Now what does it do? It is a 0-cost card that is a bullet that always is guaranteed to be type effective while having a 240% base multiplier, and also being always guaranteed to crit. Yeah. This HVAP itself also counts towards Janet's ability to create a bullet after using 5 bullets, meaning that you use Janet plus the HVAP to create more bullets, to get more bullets, to use more bullets, to shoot more bullets, to do more bullets, to make more bullets, to shoot more bullets, to use more bullets. Yep. So that is Luke. That is the reason why he's in triple S. Now we have ourselves Khalib. Khalib's E6 just says that at the start of the battle you get 2 Silver Veil, meaning you only need 1 more Silver Veil to trigger the effect, as well as also the Silver Veil damage effect is increased by 100%. Incredibly good, but super unnecessary in like chaos runs or shorter runs, because you'll be able to get into your big Silver Veil damage hit faster, because you start with 2 out of 3. Yeah, I mean, probably turns chaos runs and chaos encounters into an absolute breeze, but also isn't going to take your unbuilt Khalib from bad deck to godly deck just with one epiphany, which is why she's an A. Then we have ourselves Magna. Now, Magna, what she gains is at the start of the turn, you gain 1 enhanced counter attack. This enhanced counter attack increases the counter attack damage amount by 30%. Now, this is a bit where speculation comes in, but the way this looks like is that it's only going to make one counter attack, and that counter attack is 30% stronger than a normal counter attack, rather than increasing the counter attack damage by 30%, right? This is just like okay, you have your normal 10 counter attacks and now you get one counter attack that is enhanced. Obviously, hey, if anybody has E6 Magna and he wants to prove me wrong because you tested it around, let me know, but that's the way it seems, that's the way it looks like, and that's the way it makes sense. But maybe you actually can increase for some reason the counterattack damage by is made multiple, right? Like by up to 60%. If that truly is the case, then she would obviously go from B all the way to triple S versus just one hit that does 30% more damage than normal. So that is what we have ourselves here. So yeah, because like how would you even trigger this, right? Like upon activation, I don't know, right? Low chance, but it's at least decently possible, so I at least wanted to mention it. Then we have ourselves Rin. So Rin is straightforward. At the start of your battle, you gain Dark Mist stance. At the start of the turn, should you be in Dark Mist stance, you gain 2 morale. Boom. All of a sudden, your whole team 40% more damage for the whole duration of the fight through the use of 2 morale, meaning that your multi-hits are more effective, meaning that everything else just deals 40% more damage. Donezo. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, 40% damage increase to everything. And also the first damage increase on a Rin outside of the E1. And I guess if you count the ultimate. Here the E6, whenever Orlea uses a creation card, you take the star level, multiply it by 50, and that gives you the AoE damage amount she deals. So a 3-star would be 150% fixed damage to all enemies. Unless you somehow find like a super mega ultra hyper giga super creation spam build that sends like 100 creations in a turn, I don't really see this making any difference for any Orlea players. Then again, if you have E6 Orlea, let me know down below if it's actually any different. And then here, whenever Mei Lin gains Flame Dragon twice, 100% fixed damage to all enemies and inflict Ember. The way you gain Flame Dragon is by breaking a target. So the second time you ravage something, could be same target, could be a different target, AoE damage and 3 Ember, meaning the next hit that breaks or on a break target gets the plus 60% damage bonus from Ember. Honestly, this is whatever. It really doesn't do anything, and using an Omega code for this, at this point you might as well just say goodbye to it. Then here also pretty straightforward. At the start of the turn, the target that has the Floral Scent all the way back from the E2 just gets Mark applied to them. Mark is the target gets hit by an attack card, 100% attack damage or extra attack damage, which obviously goes higher with attack damage, just like as like a follow-up attack against the target. It's not the greatest thing in the world. That is why she is in B. Then we have ourselves Renoa. So Renoa, whenever a Dirge Bullet card is drawn, deal 50% additional damage to a random enemy. The big kicker here is drawn only counts if you draw them out of your draw pile. The action of using a, at least that's currently the way the game handles this, and that is, if for example we have 10 Dirge Bullets in the graveyard and we move them all from our graveyard to our hand, the E6 is not going to trigger, only if these 10 bullets go from our deck into our hand, like getting drawn out of the draw pile. Would it actually count as a draw action, meaning the E6 would trigger? Maybe they change it in the future, maybe they change it in a sneaky patch, but that's the way that when I tested, for example, the way I tested it, just so you get an idea, is you know the Ecstasy of Violence card, right? It has a 9 cost and it reduces itself by 1 per card drawn. If you play, the way I did that, or the way that works is, for example, you play out a Rin card, right? And then that Rin card goes into the use pile, and then you use the card that gets the Rin card out of the used pile, gets the other card out of the draw pile, the cost of the Ecstasy of Violence only decreases by 1 instead of 2. Tangent over. Hunting mark to a random enemy. When hit by the effect of commence the hunt, you gain 1 morale, meaning it's just slightly worse than what you gain from a Rin. Rin starts your turn, you get 2 morale. Hugo hits the target with commence the hunt, you gain 1 morale, so a 20% damage bonus to every single attack action taken by your whole team. Yuki increases max stacks of Sword Dance by 1 and changes increase effect to increase by 15, meaning that if you draw 3 cards of this unit in 1 turn, the attack damage amount increases by 45% rather than 20%. You could argue this as a triple S tier, but you could also keep it in S. It doesn't really take too much away from each other, but if for whatever reason you're sitting on E6 Yuki and you need a little bit more justification, this wouldn't be the worst idea ever. So, and then we have ourselves that out of the way, bringing us to Shizuru. So what Shizuru does, this is a bit of a mystery to me still, and that is during the official English livestream, what it said was, word for word, increases the damage gain from Lunar Shard to plus 15%, and when you have 3 Lunar Shard stacks, adds 1 hit to Shadow of the Moon plus. Currently, it only, it lost the plus 5% effect. So, if any of you have a E6 Shizuru, do please let me know down in the comments below. Does it actually increase to 45%? Or did they remove that and decided that this is going to be her E6? Because that's the difference between ranking it higher or ranking it lower. Just like this, it's like A, maybe high A, but if the effect is actually there, it's a S or potentially even triple S, the same way that a Yuki goes from S to triple S with hers. So for the moment, with the way it's worded, with the way the game tells us it works, then yeah, we would have to rank it lower in exchange, bringing us to Haru, triple S. Reason why? Pretty simple. The damage reduction for anchor shot used with insufficient AP is changed to 20%, meaning you use a 3-cost anchor at nothing, it only loses 60%. You use a 2-cost anchor at 1, it only loses 20%. It still does 80% of the original damage, and you use a anchor shot at 2 at 0, it still does 60% of its damage, meaning that you could play, let's say, 5 anchor shots at 0 cost that would still deal the damage equivalent of 3 actual anchor shots, because it's like 60% times 5, 300%, yada yada. But yeah, it just builds on the E2 and it makes her... Yeah, you can spam as many anchor shots as you want. You're never really gonna run out of AP because you can just spam it for free. And then we have Karen. So Karen says whenever you create a futility card, there's a 50% chance of applying either vulnerable, which is a plus 50% damage increase to the next hit taken, or I guess multiplicative 50%, weaken, which reduces the damage dealt by the next attack of the target by 25%, or injured, which either is the shield one, but I think that has a different name. So the way I would look at this is probably reduces the healing that the target does to itself. Meaning a target can heal itself less or just heals itself less when Karen inflicts injured on the target, which also would, for example, go with the Void Boss, the family head that heals itself, so that would get like healing reduction. Alright, so this has been it. Every single epiphany, every single ego manifestation as of this moment in the entire game ranked, giving you exactly an idea of how valuable they are. And once again, please make sure to be very careful with your Omega codes. They are damn rare.